Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, I thought it would be a nice idea if you can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I'd been doing the stealth camping thing on and off for about a year by then. Nothing serious, just weekends, sometimes a long weekend here and there. I decked out the back of my van with a mattress, some blackout curtains, a little cooler, and one of those battery-powered fans that clip to the ceiling. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me some space when I needed it. That night, I was parked off a narrow road near a trailhead just outside a small town in Northern California. I'd hiked the trail earlier that day, and there weren't many people around. No rangers, no signs. Just a dirt lot with two other cars that were gone by sundown. It was warm, mid-July. I made some instant noodles on my camp stove, sat in the back with the door cracked for air, then shut everything down when it got dark. I remember checking the time before I passed out. It was just after 11 p.m. I woke up around 3 a.m. I didn't sit up or anything right away. It was one of those slow wake-ups where your brain's foggy and you're not sure why you're awake. I laid there for a second, just listening, and then I realized what must have pulled me out of sleep. I thought I heard someone whisper my name. At first I figured I was dreaming. I've had sleep paralysis before. I know how weird your brain can be at night. But then I heard it again, closer this time. A voice, low and kind of raspy, just barely loud enough to make out. Hey! My name. That time, I sat up. My heart was already racing, but I kept telling myself it had to be in my head. There was no reason anyone would know my name out here. I reached for my phone. 3:09 a.m. I was about to peek through one of the curtains when I noticed something that made me stop completely. All the windows were fogged. Not from the inside, from the outside. That might not sound like a big deal, but when you've been camping out of your car as long as I had, you get used to what's normal and what isn't. Fog from your breath collects on the inside, not outside. It was warm out. I didn't have the fan running. I hadn't cracked a window. The only way the windows would be fogged like that on the outside is if someone had been breathing or standing near them. I froze. I didn't hear anything now, but I wasn't about to open the curtain. I sat there in the dark for a while, straining to hear even the tiniest sound. Every minute felt like 10. Then, from the back window, right behind where my head had been a few minutes ago, I heard it again. My name, come out. I didn't move. I couldn't. I didn't recognize the voice. It didn't sound angry or anything, which somehow made it worse. It was too calm. I started thinking maybe I was being messed with. Maybe someone had seen me earlier in town or on the trail, maybe even followed me out here. I didn't know, but it didn't feel like a prank. It felt deliberate. I kept my phone light off and slid down so I was flat on the mattress again, staying quiet. The whispering stopped, but I didn't feel any better. It was dead silent out there, no wind, no bugs, not even trees rustling. Just this weird, thick stillness. At one point I thought I heard footsteps, slow and shuffling, like someone walking in tight circles around the van. But I wasn't sure. I just stayed still and waited. About 20 minutes later, maybe longer, I finally got the nerve to peek out the side curtain just a little, just enough to look through a crack at the passenger side mirror. That's when I saw the smudges. They were long, vertical smears, like someone had dragged their fingers down the window glass. One set. 2 sets. 3. Different windows, same pattern. Whoever it was, they'd gone around the van, touching the glass, breathing on it. That told me 2 things. They'd been there for a while. And they were trying to freak me out. It worked. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed down, clutching this little foldable camping knife I kept under my pillow, even though it was basically useless. I didn't hear the voice again. Just that nothingness outside. Eventually the sky started to lighten, and birds started chirping again. I waited until I could see my hands before I sat up. Then, real quick, I opened the curtain fully and scanned around. Nobody. I got out, locked the van, and walked a wide circle around the lot and the tree line. Still no one. But the smudges were real. You could see the trails from fingers, even palm prints on the back window. I drove straight into town. Didn't even eat breakfast, just left. I ended up stopping at a gas station a few miles out. While I was filling up, I noticed something wedged under the passenger side wiper. At first I thought it was a receiver flyer, but when I pulled it out, it was a scrap of paper, just torn notebook paper, folded once. Inside, written in shaky all caps with pencil, was just this. Why did you lock the doors? That was it. No signature, no threats. Just that question. I looked around the lot and didn't see anyone, but I didn't stick around. I tossed the paper and drove the rest of the day straight home. I haven't stealth camped since. I'd parked in worse spots before. It was a narrow dirt pull-off off a fire road outside of Yosemite. Nothing fancy, just some flattened gravel where hunters or hikers probably parked during the day. No signs, no gates, no private property warnings. I'd driven past it earlier in the afternoon on a scouting loop and came back around dusk. No one else was out there, no cars, no lights in the distance. Just thick pine trees and that dusty stillness you get in the woods when the wind dies. It was late September, so it got cold fast once the sun dropped. I made a quick dinner on my camp stove, brushed my teeth outside, and climbed into the back of the van before 9. I remember checking the locks, driver's side, passenger side, back doors. It was muscle memory by that point. I locked everything before I so much as laid down. I even pulled a bungee cord across the inside of the rear handles just out of habit. It didn't really do anything, but it made me feel better. I closed the blackout curtains, turned on my little fan, and laid down with a podcast going on low. The road had been quiet all evening, and I didn't expect that to change. I had one of those simple vans, no side windows, no ventilation system, just an old cargo model I insulated and threw a mattress in. It wasn't Instagram pretty, but it kept me warm and hidden. Stealth camping was never really about comfort anyway. I drifted off pretty quick. What woke me up at first was a soft click. Not loud, not even something I would have noticed if I hadn't been dead asleep in total silence. But it was the kind of sound that didn't belong. At first I thought maybe it was a branch falling on the roof or something shifting in the van. I opened my eyes, still groggy, and it was pitch black. No lights coming through the curtains. Dead quiet. Then I heard the click again. Metal on metal. A little louder this time. I froze. The van barely moved, but there was this pressure shift. Like when someone steps into a room behind you. I didn't hear footsteps. Nothing like that. Just that second click and a weird feeling that someone was right on the other side of the back doors. I didn't have a weapon. Closest thing I had was a heavy flashlight in the front seat and a pocket knife somewhere in my backpack. My phone was under my pillow, but I didn't even reach for it. I just laid there, barely breathing, listening. Then came the sound I still hear in my head sometimes, the back handle turning. It didn't creak or rattle. It was slow, careful. Someone was trying to be quiet. And the thing is, I locked it. I know I locked it. That's the first thing I do when I park. Every time. But the handle turned. And then, without any warning, the door cracked open. Just an inch or two. Enough to let in the cold and the dark and the smell of pine needles. That hinge squealed, and before I could even sit up, it opened a little more. I screamed. I didn't think, didn't sit up, didn't yell words. Just this raw, panic scream that shot out of me before my brain could catch up. The door slammed shut instantly. I scrambled off the mattress and shoved my shoulder against the back doors, still yelling. My heart was hammering. I fumbled for the bungee cord, looped it tighter, and pressed both hands against the doors, not that it would do much. Outside, I heard crashing footsteps, someone running off into the woods behind the van. Heavy, fast. Not even trying to be quiet anymore. I didn't move for a while. I think I stayed pressed against those doors for at least 10 minutes, heart racing, ears straining for any sound coming back. But it was quiet again. Way too quiet. Eventually I worked up the nerve to grab my phone and turn on the flashlight. My hands were shaking. I pulled the curtain back just a crack on the side window and scanned outside. Nothing. Just empty trees and moonlight. I crawled into the front seat and started the engine. As soon as those headlights lit up the woods in front of me, I floored it. Drove like that dirt road was a freeway. Didn't care about the ruts or rocks, just wanted distance. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station 40 miles away. When I finally got out to check the van, I saw it. A clean little scratch on the back door, right next to the handle. Thin, vertical, like from a key. That door had been locked. I triple-checked the lock mechanism inside. There was no way it had popped open on its own. Someone had a key. Or they picked it. Either way, they didn't just stumble on my van. They came prepared. I stopped stealth camping after that. Still drive the van sometimes. But I always stay in places with people now. A lit parking lot, a truck stop, anything. Anywhere I can scream and have someone actually hear me. I'd been on the road for a couple of weeks at that point, trying to save money by not paying for campgrounds. Most nights I stayed in Walmart lots or back roads, but this one night, everything nearby had no overnight parking signs. I didn't want to risk a ticket, so I drove a little further out and found a warehouse on the edge of this industrial zone outside a mid-sized city. Place was dead quiet. No other cars. No foot traffic. Just loading docks and dumpsters behind a chain link fence that had a section cut open, like someone had driven through it before. I rolled through that gap and parked way in the back, behind some old pallets and a broken forklift. Didn't turn on any lights, didn't open any doors. I packed the van in tight so the rear was blocked from view, and I tucked into the sleeping bag in my clothes just after 11. There was no signal back there, which I hadn't noticed until I was already in bed. My hotspot couldn't load anything, and I hadn't downloaded anything to watch. So I just laid there listening to the sounds, mostly wind, a couple of distant cars every now and then. Real quiet otherwise. I wasn't fully asleep when I first noticed it. There was this faint tap sound, not like a knock. Just a tiny noise. Plastic on metal maybe. It came from the passenger side, near the front. At first I thought it was just something hitting the van from the wind trash, maybe. But then it happened again. This time more deliberate. Like a knuckle. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling of the van and listened. I thought maybe it was some local security guard doing a check. That made sense. They'd see an unmarked van backed up behind a building and wanted to check it out. Maybe they were giving a friendly knock before calling the cops. But if that were true, they would have said something by now. Instead, silence. Then real soft, a voice right outside the sliding door. Hey. Just one word. Not loud. More like a whisper. My chest felt tight immediately. I didn't say anything. Then a little louder. I've been watching you for hours. I sat up, completely alert. I didn't make a sound. I didn't even breathe. Just wanted to see if you were real. That's exactly what he said. The tone wasn't angry or weirdly cheerful or anything. Just calm. Like he was making small talk. I couldn't tell how close he was. He wasn't banging on the van, wasn't shouting. Just standing there, talking like I was supposed to answer. I didn't. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps. They circled around the back. Slow ones. Real slow. Like he was dragging a foot. I couldn't tell if he was walking away or just pacing. I crawled forward as quietly as I could and peeked through the blackout curtain on the windshield. I didn't see anyone out front, but the lighting was awful, just a bit of orange glow from a streetlight way down the road, nothing else. My van's windows were tinted, so maybe he couldn't see in. That was the only thing keeping me from freaking out completely. Then, I heard it again. On the driver's side door this time. Tap. Tap. And then real soft, almost amused. I thought you were fake, man. Thought you were empty. I moved back and grabbed the keys. I didn't start the van right away because I didn't want to give away my exact location inside, like if he was crouching near a window or something. I just held them, trying to plan. If I opened the curtain and turned the engine on, he might try the door right away. I had no idea if he had anything on him. A weapon. A buddy waiting nearby. Anything. Then I heard a different sound, like plastic scraping against the van's side panel. Long, slow. Like a bottle or stick or something being dragged down the metal. I started the engine. The moment it turned over, I heard running. Fast footsteps moving toward the back. I threw the van into drive and floored it, not even looking. I clipped something, maybe a stack of wood or a crate, but I didn't care. I just plowed through the narrow lot, hit the curb hard, and bounced onto the street. There were no headlights behind me. No sign of a car. Just darkness in the mirror. I drove 20 minutes without stopping. Pulled into a 24-hour grocery store lot and parked right under one of those big sodium lights. Then I checked the outside. There were smudges all over the passenger window. Palm prints. Someone had been leaning on it. On the driver's side, there were streaks like a key or knife had been dragged across the paint. But what got me the most was the back of the van. Someone had tried the latch. It was still locked, but the rubber around it was peeled back, like they were trying to get a grip on it to pry it open. I didn't go back to that warehouse. I didn't even report it. What would I say? Some guy talked to me through my van wall and scratched my paint. They'd just say I shouldn't have been parked there. I still stealth camp now and then, but only where there's lights and people, and I always sleep with the keys in my hand. I was about 3 months into living out of my van when this happened. I'd been bouncing around the Pacific Northwest, doing freelance work from my laptop and trying to keep expenses low. Most nights I parked in quiet neighborhoods or near public parks, places where you can blend in without anyone giving you grief. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. This night I was parked in the back corner of a library lot in a small town in Oregon. Real sleepy place, barely any traffic after 9 p.m. I checked beforehand, no signs saying no overnight parking, and the library didn't open until 10 the next morning. Perfect spot. I backed the van in so my rear faced a hedge and a retaining wall, which gave me a little cover. There were a couple of streetlights out front, but nothing near me. Just enough ambient light to see shadows if someone walked by. I cooked a simple dinner on my camp stove, cleaned up, locked everything, and climbed into bed around midnight. The van was quiet, just the occasional wind through the trees or a car a block away. Somewhere around 2 a.m., my carbon monoxide detector started beeping. 3 quick chirps, then silence. I bolted upright. It had never gone off before. I tested it when I first installed it, and it worked fine, but it had stayed quiet since. I opened the slider door immediately and let in some air. Didn't smell anything. Didn't feel lightheaded. I even cracked the back doors. No obvious issue. After a few minutes of fresh air, I figured maybe it glitched or the battery was going. I shut the doors again, reset the alarm, and went back to sleep. About 40 minutes later, same thing. 3 chirps. I sat up again. Still no smell. Still no dizziness or headache. I didn't even have the stove on, obviously. But it freaked me out. I reset the alarm again, opened a vent, and checked the front of the van through the curtain. No one around. No cars passing. Just dead quiet. I debated leaving, but it was late and I was dead tired, so I left the vent cracked and tried to sleep again. At 4:12 a.m. exactly, I remember because I checked, I woke up freezing. Like the kind of cold that makes your eyes water. The detector wasn't beeping, but something felt off. I sat up and noticed a faint smell. Like burnt rubber. Not strong, but not right. I opened the back doors to air it out again and stepped outside to check the van. That's when I saw the ground behind it. There were footprints in the dirt, right up to the tailpipe. Smudged, but fresh. I crouched down and looked underneath. Something was stuffed inside the exhaust. At first I thought it was a rag or a plastic bag, but when I grabbed a flashlight, I saw it was a bundle of socks, like 5 or 6 of them, jammed in hard with a stick or something. Someone had clearly been back there during the night, more than once, shoving more in. That's when my stomach dropped. The first time the alarm went off, I hadn't thought to check the tailpipe. Whoever did it must have been watching, saw me open the van and come out, and waited until I went back to sleep before coming back to add more. I yanked the socks out and they stank. Whatever they used to pack them smelled like oil or something. I don't even want to think about what the plan was. I got back in the van and drove straight out of there without even brushing my teeth. I didn't care. I just wanted to be moving. 2 blocks away, I passed a gas station with a lit-up convenience store. It was empty except for the guy at the counter. I pulled in and went inside just to feel normal for a minute, maybe get coffee. As I was paying, I mentioned the carbon monoxide thing and asked if they had any cameras pointed toward the library lot. He said no, but paused and asked what kind of van I drove. I told him. He nodded, slow. Then said, some guy came through here earlier, maybe an hour ago, asking what time the library opened. Said he had a meeting there, but he didn't seem like the type. Just off. Kept scratching his neck and looking over his shoulder. I asked what kind of car he had. The clerk said he didn't drive. Just walked off toward the back roads behind the strip mall. I left and didn't look back. I parked in a big box store lot with other vehicles and didn't sleep the rest of the night. I bought a dash cam with parking mode the next morning, and a motion sensor light for the rear doors. And I never ever park somewhere again without checking my tailpipe first. I'd been doing van life for about 4 months when this happened. Not full time, just off and on between freelance jobs. I liked the freedom, the quiet. Sometimes I'd park near parks or trailheads, but other times, if I got in late and didn't feel like scouting a proper spot, I'd find a residential street that looked quiet and safe. That night, I was passing through a small town in Northern California. I'd left a friend's place late, didn't want to pay for a campground, so I figured I'd just find a low-key neighborhood and crash for the night. Around 11 p.m., I found this street that felt perfect. Not too upscale, not too rundown. A mix of one-story houses and duplexes, no parking signs, barely any cars on the street. It was one of those dead-end roads with a cul-de-sac at the end, and a row of tall hedges separating it from a school field. I parked under a tree, between 2 driveways, making sure not to block anything. Turned off all my lights, drew the curtains, locked up, and climbed into bed. I remember how still it was. Not even the usual dog barking or distant traffic. Just the hum of a far-off porch light and some crickets. I felt lucky to have found the spot. I fell asleep fast, but sometime later, had to be around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Not from a sound, really. Just a weird alert feeling, like my body knew something was off before I could figure out what. At first everything seemed normal. The fan was dark, quiet. I could hear the faint whir of my fan on low. Then I noticed a soft light moving on the ceiling. Not flashing, not headlights sweeping past. Just a glow that wasn't there before. I leaned toward the front, peeking between the curtain and the dashboard. That's when I saw it. A car was parked directly beside my van on the driver's side. Not behind me, not across the street right next to me, like we were in a parallel parking lot together, but there were no marked spots. The passenger side of the car was only a couple feet from my sliding door. It was a small silver sedan, maybe a Toyota. Engine running, lights on. Not high beams, just enough to light up the interior a little. And someone was inside. The driver. He was sitting still, facing forward. His head was tilted slightly toward my van, but not enough that I could see his face. Just the silhouette. No phone light. No music. Not smoking. Just there. I froze. I didn't want to move or make noise. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. At first I thought maybe he was just using his GPS or something. Maybe he pulled over to check a map or text. But he didn't move. Not a single time. Just sat there. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I started getting nervous. This wasn't some teen checking directions. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't talking. He wasn't doing anything. And he wasn't leaving. After about 30 minutes, I decided to try looking through the tiny vent in the side curtain just enough to see his face. It was too dark to get a clear look, but I could tell he was staring straight ahead, except his eyes kept flicking to the side. Toward my window. He'd stare forward for a few seconds, then glance right at my van. Over and over. No expression, no blinking. Just that slow shift of his gaze. I didn't know what to do. If I turned on the engine and took off, he'd definitely hear it. My van's not loud, but in a quiet neighborhood like that, anything stands out. And if I tried to get out and talk to him, I have to open the door on the same side he was parked on. No way. I considered calling the cops, but what would I even say? A guy parked near me and is just sitting there? It's not illegal. Just weird. Plus, if the police showed up and started asking me why I was parked there, I could get hassled or ticketed or worse. I'd had enough close calls already with nosy neighbors and concerned citizens. An hour went by. Maybe more. He never turned off the car. Never left. Just kept sitting there, looking straight ahead and then over at me. My legs started cramping. I couldn't adjust or stretch without making noise. I stayed curled up in my bed, barely blinking. The air felt thick, like I couldn't take a full breath. Then, finally, his headlights shut off. I heard the soft click of the switch, but the engine stayed on. A second later, his dome light came on. Just for a second. Long enough for me to catch a glimpse of his face through the curtain. Middle-aged. Pale. Very still. And looking straight at my van window. The light went off again. And then he killed the engine. I waited, heart pounding. Everything was dark again. No movement. I thought maybe he'd gotten out. I couldn't hear anything, but the hedges behind me rustled slightly. Could have been wind. Could have been him. I sat up slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible, and reached for my pepper spray in the drawer. I kept my hand on it. About 10 more minutes passed. I kept expecting a knock or the sound of footsteps. Nothing. Then, just when I was about to open the curtain to check, his engine turned back on. Lights didn't come on. Just the sound of the engine, low and steady. And he drove away. No tire squeal. No rush. Just slowly pulled away and turned around the cul-de-sac like he'd been on a casual drive. I waited until he was fully out of sight. Then I jumped into the driver's seat, locked the doors again just in case, and left. I didn't even change out of the t-shirt I was sleeping in. I drove straight to a 24-hour grocery store 2 towns over and parked under the lights near the entrance. That was the last time I ever parked on a dead-end street. I pulled into that spot around 10:45 at night. It was just outside of town, on this narrow shoulder between 2 properties. One looked abandoned, and the other had a house set far back with no lights on. There weren't any street lamps, just a soft orange glow bouncing off the clouds from town a few miles out. Not pitch black, but dark enough to make me feel tucked away. I'd been doing stealth camping for a few weeks by then. Nothing hardcore, just sleeping in my van on road trips to save money. I kept the windows blacked out with thermal curtains, used magnetic covers for the front windshield, and had battery-powered lights inside. I always parked late, left early, didn't make noise. Nobody ever bothered me. That night felt the same as all the others. Quiet. I brushed my teeth with a water bottle, locked the doors, cracked the front windows slightly for airflow, and climbed into the back to stretch out. I watched some downloaded episodes on my phone, then shut everything down around midnight. At first, it was fine. Just a little breeze rustling through the trees, the occasional car passing way off in the distance. The kind of background noise that makes you feel like everything's normal. I must have been asleep an hour or 2 when I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. It was faint. Just a slow, irregular scratching. Like something brushing the side of the van, not hard, but deliberate. At first I thought maybe a branch was moving in the wind, but I knew for a fact I hadn't parked near any trees. Just scrubby weeds and gravel. I sat up, quietly. The sound kept going. It wasn't constant, more like short strokes. A few seconds of scratching, then silence. Then it would start again, a little lower down. Almost like someone was dragging something along the outside wall and stopping every few inches. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might drown out the noise. I leaned forward slowly and peeked through the little slit between the curtains at the front. Nothing. Just the shoulder, the road, some overgrown weeds in the ditch. I couldn't see the passenger side where the sound was coming from. Then it stopped. I waited. 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Nothing. Eventually, I told myself it could have been an animal, maybe a raccoon brushing against the van. Not totally impossible. I lay back down, not really expecting to sleep, but I must have dozed off again. Around 3:30, I woke up to a different sound. It wasn't scratching this time. It was footsteps. Gravel crunching. Slow. Close. I held my breath and listened. They stopped near the front of the van. Not on the driver's side, the other side, where the sliding door is. Just stood there. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. Then I heard a soft tap on the side panel. Not a knock. More like testing. Like they were feeling around. Another tap. Then silence. I reached quietly toward the drawer under my bed where I kept a flashlight and a knife. My hand was shaking. I didn't grab the light. I didn't want to make it obvious I was awake. But I held the knife tight. For the next hour, I didn't hear anything else. No more footsteps, no sounds of retreat, nothing. Just silence. I eventually got up the nerve to peek again through the curtain. Still nothing out front. I stayed in that same stiff position until the sun came up. Once it was fully light, I climbed into the front seat and started the engine right away. I didn't even bother changing clothes or brushing my teeth. I just wanted to get out of there. But when I stepped out to use the bathroom at a gas station 10 minutes later, I noticed something under my windshield wiper. It was a piece of yellow-lined notebook paper, folded twice. No envelope. Just wedged under the wiper blade. I unfolded it. Written in black pen, all caps, barely legible. Don't lock your doors tonight. No name. Nothing else. I stood there holding it, trying to make sense of it. My stomach dropped. Then I started looking around the van more closely. On the passenger side, along the lower panel, there were long, thin streaks in the dust, not scratches exactly, just marks. Like something dull had been dragged along it. And lower down, near the base of the sliding door, I noticed tiny smudges. Greasy fingerprints. I checked the lock, it was still engaged. Nothing looked forced. But the thought that someone had been trying to get in while I was lying a few feet away made me sick. I didn't go back to stealth camping for a while after that. I booked a motel for the next 2 nights, even though I couldn't really afford it. I kept the note. It's in my glove box. Just as a reminder, I guess. I parked at a trailhead just off a forest road a few miles outside a small town in Oregon. I'd used the same spot before without any issues. It wasn't well trafficked, but it wasn't remote enough to feel sketchy. Just a wide gravel turnout near the start of a hiking trail. No overnight parking signs, no gates, no houses in sight. Trees on both sides gave decent cover. For stealth camping, it checked all the boxes. I got there a little after 9 and made dinner with the doors closed, just a cold wrap and some chips, then turned off the lights and kept things quiet. I always made sure my curtains were up before dusk. Once it got dark, I read for a bit on my Kindle, then laid down around 11. My phone had no service, which was normal out there, but I still had music downloaded and a battery lantern if I needed it. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. My phone was in airplane mode, so no clock. It was still dark, though pitch black behind the curtains. I heard something crunching in the gravel, slow and steady, like footsteps circling the van. At first, I stayed still and tried to convince myself it was an animal. Maybe a deer. Or a raccoon sniffing around. The footsteps stopped near the rear doors, then I heard a soft clunk. Like something being set down. Then dragging. That's when I started to feel it. Not panic, not yet, just that tight, alert feeling in my chest like something was off and I needed to be completely silent. Then there was a noise against the wall of the van. Not a knock, more like fabric sliding across the metal. At first I thought it might have been wind, but the air had been dead still when I went to bed. Then a flashlight beam hit the back window. It lit up the curtain like a stage light, bright, direct, moving slowly in a small circle. Then it disappeared. Then another beam hit the side window by my bed. It wasn't like someone randomly shining a light while walking by. This was steady. Controlled. As if they were inspecting something. I stayed frozen. I didn't even try to peek. I didn't want any motion at all behind the curtains. I heard the soft rustle of plastic and more dragging. The sound of something being unrolled. Then tape. The slow rip of duct tape coming off the roll. It took me way too long to realize what was happening. Whoever was out there was covering my van with a tarp. I could hear the weight of it brushing down the side, then the sound of tape again, this time close to the passenger door. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe right. I just stared at the ceiling and gripped the edge of my blanket. I tried to run through every scenario in my head. Someone pranking me? Someone trying to hide the van from view? Robbery? But why would someone take the time to tarp it? Another piece of tape went down, this one louder and longer, like they were securing the front. I kept waiting for a knock or the door handle to jiggle. But nothing like that happened. Instead, I heard a zipper. At first I thought it was the tarp, maybe part of it had a zippered seam. But then I realized it was way too loud for that, and way too close. It was on the driver's side. I had a soft-sided rooftop cargo bag up top, one of those waterproof ones you strap to roof bars. I'd forgotten to lock the zipper pulls together with a padlock, which I usually did. The sound I heard was someone unzipping that bag. I started sweating. There was nothing valuable in there, just an old sleeping bag and some clothes, but it wasn't about that. Someone climbing onto the van, messing with it like that in the middle of the night, after covering it with a tarp, it didn't make sense. It wasn't normal. Then it got quiet. For a long time. No footsteps, no tape, no zipper, no voices. I stayed perfectly still, not even daring to shift my weight. Eventually I grabbed my phone and flicked it off airplane mode to check the time. It was 4:12 a.m. Still no signal. I started thinking about what would happen if I just bolted. Threw the curtain aside, climbed into the front seat, peeled off. But what if someone was blocking the front? Or standing right outside? I had no idea where they were. I hadn't heard anyone walk away. So I waited. For over an hour. Every few minutes I thought I heard a footstep or a breath, but it was hard to tell what was real and what was in my head. At 5:23, the sky started to lighten. Just barely. I watched the curtain go from black to gray. I listened hard for any movement. Nothing. When I finally moved, I did it fast. I yanked the curtain aside, turned the key in the ignition with my left hand while reaching over to pull the passenger curtain down with my right. I saw the tarp immediately. It had been laid over the windshield and taped to the corners. The side mirrors had strips of duct tape hanging from them. Whoever did it was trying to block my view or hide the van. I threw it in reverse without even bothering to remove the tarp. It flapped up a little from the air as I backed up, just enough to let me see the road. I cranked the wheel, got myself turned around, and floored it. The tarp peeled off halfway down the road and blew into the woods. I didn't stop until I was back in town. I parked in a grocery store lot, just sitting there with my hands gripping the wheel until they stopped shaking. Later, I checked the rooftop cargo bag. The zipper was fully open, and the sleeping bag was missing. There was also something I hadn't put there, a short, dirty piece of rope, tied in a loop, just left sitting on top of my folded hoodie. I still think about how long that person might have been standing out there, listening, and what they would have done if I hadn't woken up. I was passing through Nevada, trying to make it to Reno before the weekend, but I'd left late and ended up more tired than I expected. Around midnight, I pulled into a big box store lot on the edge of a smaller town. I don't remember the name, something with a number in it, and parked way out near the back fence. I'd stealth camped dozens of times before and had a pretty good system. Curtains up, lights off, don't get out once I'm parked. I wasn't planning on staying the whole night, just wanted a nap before continuing. But once I laid down, I was out cold. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No birds, no cars, not even that hum you get from nearby buildings. Just dead silence. That was weird. The second thing was how dark it was. Too dark. I'd parked under a light pole. I remember doing it on purpose. It made me feel a little safer in store lots. But when I opened my eyes, it was pitch black inside. No glow from the edges of the curtains. Just total black. I sat up and pulled the curtain from the side window. Still black. That didn't make sense. Even on cloudy nights, even in the middle of nowhere, there's usually some light. I pushed the curtain open all the way and leaned close, squinting. The window was completely blacked out. At first, I thought it might have fogged over, but when I touched the glass, it wasn't damp. It felt smooth. My fingers came away dry. I tried the back window. Same thing. All of them were dark, but not from the inside. That's when I turned on my phone flashlight and shined it against the curtain. I could see it up close now. The glass wasn't just dark, it was matte black. Sprayed. The texture had that powdery, uneven look you get with Railkin paint. I jumped out of bed, moved to the front, and yanked down the curtain covering the windshield. Same thing. Blacked out completely, edge to edge. It was paint. Someone had spray painted over every window. The weirdest part? No paint had gotten inside. No smell, no drips, no overspray on the door frames. Whoever did it had been careful, methodical. I tried to roll down the driver's side window, just to see if I could get a few out, maybe peel the paint off or wipe a spot clear. Nothing happened. I tried the passenger side. Same thing. I turned the ignition. Dead. No click, no crank. Just nothing. The battery was completely gone. That didn't make sense either. It had been working fine the day before. I hadn't even used anything that would drain it. No lights, no heat, no music. That was the moment I felt it in my chest. Not panic, exactly, but a pressure. Like something was really, really wrong, and it was already too late to fix it. I sat perfectly still, trying to listen. It was so quiet, I could hear my own breath. I pressed my ear to the wall and waited. Nothing. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't even want to move. I had no idea how long I'd been asleep, what time it was, or how far I was from anyone. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to crack the driver's side door. I only opened it an inch, just enough to peek out. More black. The door frame was clear, no paint on the seals, but someone had put something up against the outside of the van. Cardboard, maybe, or fabric. Something was pressed flat against the metal, blocking out any light. I pushed the door open another few inches and reached out. It was foam board. Multiple sheets of thick black foam board taped together and wedged between the van and something heavy. I pushed harder. It didn't budge. I closed the door again, quietly, and moved to the back. Same thing. Someone had boxed the van in. Not with a full structure, but with just enough to block sight lines and make it impossible to see out. It had taken time. Effort. Someone planned this. I tried the horn out of instinct, forgetting the battery was dead. Nothing. I held my phone up 1 bar. No Wi-Fi. I tried dialing 911 anyway. Call failed. I felt sick. That's when I noticed something new, a sound I hadn't heard before. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Scraping. It was faint, slow, metallic. Like someone dragging a key along the side of the van. It moved from the back to the front, then stopped. I didn't breathe. I just stayed crouched by the bed, staring at the wall, hoping the person outside couldn't hear my heartbeat. After a minute or so, there was another sound. A tap. Not loud, just a single, light tap near the rear wheel well. Then nothing. For a long time. I don't know how long I sat there. My phone said it was 4:43 a.m., but I wasn't sure how accurate that was. When the first light started to bleed in from under the van, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I waited until I could see the faintest glow behind the curtains, then moved fast. I grabbed my tire iron and the emergency window hammer I kept under the bed. I went for the back door and shoved it open with my shoulder. There was a stack of foam board leaned against it, loosely held in place with duct tape and resting against a shopping cart. It all toppled backward when I pushed. I climbed out, blinking in the morning light, looking around in every direction. No one was there. The van was sitting in the farthest corner of the lot, near a chain-link fence that separated the property from a drainage ditch. There were 2 other cars in the lot, both parked near the front of the store. Lights were on inside. I could see an employee cleaning the windows. The store had opened already. I turned around to look at the van. Every single window, including the little one in the back door, was sprayed solid black. Someone had done it carefully, with masking around the trim to avoid getting any on the body. They hadn't tagged anything, hadn't broken in, hadn't stolen anything. Just sealed me in. There was something taped to the driver's side mirror. A single sheet of printer paper in a plastic sleeve, duct taped flat. I peeled it off. It was a map. The same parking lot, drawn by hand. Little arrows pointed to different corners. Circles labeled blind spot, gate, ditch. At the bottom, written in thick black marker. Next time, don't sleep so long. I drove straight to the auto shop down the road and got them to check the battery. It had been disconnected, not drained. The mechanic said the terminal clamps looked like they'd been loosened by hand. No one followed me after that. No one tried to contact me. I never found out who did it or why. But I don't sleep in store parking lots anymore. I'd been living out of my van for almost 3 months by then. I wasn't doing the whole van life thing for Instagram or whatever, I just needed to get away for a while. It was cheaper than rent, gave me space to think, and honestly, I liked the quiet. That night, I pulled off a dirt road somewhere in northern Arizona, not far from Coconino. I'd found the spot on an old dispersed camping app, a little turnout off a Forest Service road. No signs, no gates. Not even a fire ring, just flat dirt and a few tire tracks. It was exactly the kind of place I looked for when I wanted privacy. I got there just before sunset, parked under a few tall pines, and cooked a quick dinner. I didn't make a fire, didn't play music, didn't even turn on the overhead lights. I always kept things low-key when I was that far out. One of the rules I stuck to was, if no one knows you're there, it's better not to remind them. There wasn't much cell signal, a bar or two if I held the phone up by the fan vent, so I scrolled a bit, sent a text to a friend, then crashed early. I woke up sometime later. No idea what time it was. It was dark, middle of the night dark. I didn't have a clock or anything glowing inside, and I kept my phone on airplane mode when I slept to save battery. What woke me wasn't a sound, exactly. More like the lack of one. Earlier, I heard crickets. Wind in the trees. The usual forest stuff. But now it was just dead silent. That happens sometimes, temperature drops, animals quiet down, but something about it made me uneasy. I stayed in bed and listened. After maybe 10 minutes, I heard something. Gravel. Just a crunch, far off, but unmistakable. A vehicle on the dirt road. That wasn't crazy. It was public land. People drove those roads sometimes, even late. Hunters, off-roaders, whoever. But the sound got closer. And then it stopped. I sat up and reached for my curtain, cracked it open an inch, and froze. Headlights. They weren't shining at me. Whoever it was had pulled in behind my van and killed the lights just as I looked. I saw the glow fade through the trees, like when someone shuts off a flashlight but your eyes are still adjusting. I waited, holding my breath. No doors opened. No footsteps. No voices. Just silence again. I kept staring through the crack in the curtain, expecting movement. A flashlight beam, a silhouette, anything. Nothing. I closed the curtain, moved to the front of the van, and peeked out the windshield. It was too dark to see much, my windows are tinted, and moonlight barely made it through the trees, but I could make out a shape in the side mirror. A truck. Large. Parked just a few feet behind me, angled in like it had pulled up fast. Still, no one got out. I waited, crouched low in the footwell for what felt like forever. Finally, I told myself maybe it was someone who pulled into sleep, like I had. Maybe they didn't even see me at first, or maybe they didn't care. It was legal land. I tried to lie back down, but I couldn't sleep. My stomach felt tight, like something was off. After a while, I heard another sound. This one closer. Tires again. Not the same crunch as before, this was slower. Softer. From the front. I snapped upright and looked through the passenger side curtain. Another car. It was easing in from the other direction, not headlights on, just parking lights. Creeping in, maybe 5 feet at a time. It stopped about 10 feet in front of my van. So now I was boxed in. Still, no one got out. No doors, no talking. Just two vehicles facing each other with my van trapped between. At that point, I wasn't thinking rationally. I wasn't thinking anything. My body just started sweating. I felt like I couldn't move or breathe right. I kept looking from window to window, trying to catch any motion, anything at all. Nothing happened. For a long time. Just two dead cars and a silent forest. I reached for my phone, flicked off airplane mode, and saw one bar again. Not great, but enough. I tried texting my buddy, just a quick "Are you awake?" Message failed. I turned off Wi-Fi and tried calling. Nothing. Then I did something dumb. I panicked and hit the horn. Just a quick tap. Like a warning. Immediately, the brake lights on the truck behind me lit up. Just for a second. Then off again. The car in front? Nothing. Still, no one got out. I waited a few more minutes, then made a decision. I grabbed my keys and quietly unlocked the side door. If I couldn't go forward or back, I have to go out on foot. I had a flashlight, my boots were by the bed, and my pack was already loaded with the essentials. I figured if I could slip off into the trees, I could circle around and hike out toward the road. I opened the side door just a crack. No sounds. I waited. Then eased it open another foot, stepped down onto the dirt as quietly as I could, and closed it behind me. The second I let go of the handle, I heard the click. Not from my van. From the truck. A door latch. Not opening, just a metallic clunk of someone resting their hand on the handle. I didn't wait. I sprinted straight into the trees, no flashlight, just trying to put distance between me and the vehicles. I didn't look back. I didn't stop to listen. I ran until my lungs burned, then dropped flat behind a rock outcrop and tried to control my breathing. Back the way I came, I heard nothing. No footsteps. No engines. Not even the sound of someone walking in leaves. It was like they were waiting. Eventually, I got my phone out again and found just enough of a signal to send a location pin to my buddy. I added a message. 2 vehicles boxed me in, don't know who, hiding in woods. He called. I picked up immediately and whispered the situation. He was already on the road, 2 hours away, and told me to stay hidden. I stayed there for another hour before I crept back through the trees, keeping low and circling wide. When I finally got a view of the clearing again, my van was still there. But both vehicles were gone. No tire sounds. No headlights. Just gone. I ran to the van, jumped in, started it battery fine, and reversed straight out. Didn't care about scraping trees or kicking up rocks. I just needed to get back to pavement. I met my buddy at a gas station closer to town, and we ended up crashing at a cheap motel. I barely slept. Next morning, we drove back together, just to check. The tire tracks were still there, 3 sets, mine, the truck behind, and the car in front. No signs of a camp. No trash, no footprints. No indication anyone had ever gotten out of either vehicle. It was like they just came to watch. I never went the deep off-road again without at least a second vehicle or better cell service. I don't usually tell anyone about this because it sounds crazy, but I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times, trying to understand what the hell actually happened. I was stealth camping, like I'd done plenty of times before, parked just off some quiet dirt road in the mountains. It was late fall, cold but not freezing, and I picked a spot that was hidden enough I figured no one would bother me. Just me, the van, and the woods. I'd gotten there around dusk, pulled in off the main gravel road onto a little side path. It was narrow, with thick trees on both sides, and the dirt was soft from some recent rain. Perfect for stealth camping, or so I thought. I parked the van where it wouldn't be easily seen from the road, and I was careful to keep my lights off, even inside. I cooked a quick dinner on my little camp stove, then settled in to read for a bit before bed. No music, no fire, just the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees. Around 10 or 11, I started hearing something. At first, it was faint, maybe just branches snapping or leaves crunching, easy to ignore. But it kept coming, slow and steady. At first I thought maybe it was an animal, or maybe some other camper wandering nearby. I peeked through the curtains, but the van's windows were tinted, and the dark made it almost impossible to see much. No headlights, no obvious flashlights. Just some noise moving through the underbrush. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was nothing, but then the noise got closer. Closer to the van. Like footsteps. But weirdly deliberate. Not random like an animal. Slow, careful steps in a circle around the van. I could almost feel someone pacing just outside. I pulled the curtains closed tight and grabbed my phone, trying to get a signal to call or text a friend. No bars. Nothing. Just a static buzz of no service. My heart was starting to speed up, but I told myself to calm down. People sometimes walk around campsites late at night, or maybe it was just a hunter checking spots. Still, the pacing didn't stop. Every once in a while, I thought I could hear a low voice, like a whisper, but I couldn't make out what was being said. Then, at some point, I heard something new. Not footsteps, but the faint click of a door handle. One of my van's sliding doors was locked, but I keep the handles clean and the locks functional. The handle got pulled just enough to jiggle. Not hard, but enough to make my skin crawl. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. Then the handle stopped. Minutes passed in silence. I thought maybe whoever it was gave up. I was wrong. Later, after the worst was over, I looked through the security footage from my dash cam and the little motion cameras I keep set up outside for safety. That's when I saw the real horror. It wasn't one person. It was three. 3 men, taking turns. One would creep up and try the door handles, tugging and pulling, hoping one would open. The other 2 hung back in the shadows, watching for anyone, me, a car, anything. When the first guy got tired or thought he was spotted, he'd slip back, and the next guy would move in. They rotated like some silent, awful dance around my van. They were calm about it, too. No yelling, no rushing. Just slow, calculated, patient. I could see their faces in the dim light. Not teenagers or drunks, they looked like people who did this kind of thing before. What they wanted, I don't know. Maybe they thought I had something in the van, money, drugs, whatever. Maybe they were just messing with me. At one point, one of them shined a small flashlight on the side of the van. The light was faint, but enough to catch the edge of my window. I stayed as still as I could. I didn't make a sound. After what felt like an hour, they finally walked off. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat up with my keys in hand, quietly unlocking all the doors one by one just to remind myself I could get out if I had to. At dawn, I packed up fast, triple-checking that nothing was missing, that the van wasn't damaged. I drove to a gas station where there were people around and called the police. They came out, took my statement, looked at the footage. They said it sounded like a group who'd been targeting campers in the area. No arrests, though the cameras didn't catch their plates or any identifying features clearly enough. I haven't gone stealth camping since. I don't park where I can't see around me or where I don't have cell service. I sleep with my keys in my hand, and I never underestimate the quiet patience people like that can have. It wasn't just one person messing around, it was 3, working together, waiting for me to let my guard down. And I didn't. I didn't really plan on camping that night. I'd been on the road for a few days, trying to keep costs low, so I was just looking for somewhere quiet to crash. I found this little dirt pull-off just off a back road, tucked between some trees and a slight hill. Not an official campground or anything, but it looked private enough. I parked my van, shut everything down, and set up to sleep right there. I'm not someone who usually makes a big deal out of safety. I'm careful enough, but I don't get paranoid. The spot felt okay, no cars passed for a while, just the wind and the occasional bird. I remember thinking how peaceful it was. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and dozed off. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up because of a faint noise. At first, I couldn't place it. It was soft, like running water. My first thought was rain, but when I cracked my eyes open, the sky was clear. No rain. The sound was steady, kind of like a drip or a slow leak. I sat up and tried to listen closer. It was definitely water, but it wasn't coming from above. It was coming from underneath the van. I froze. The sound was a slow hiss, and it was getting louder. I grabbed my phone and shone the flashlight under the van. The beam caught something slick on the ground, a dark, spreading puddle pooling under my tires. I couldn't tell exactly what it was at first, but then I spotted the wet trail leading from somewhere under the engine. I slid out of the van, careful not to make noise, and crouched down to check. My heart was already beating fast, but I kept telling myself maybe the coolant system just burst or something. I followed the wet trail with my light and spotted the coolant line. It was cleanly sliced, like with a knife or something sharp. That's when the weight of the situation hit me. Someone had been under the van while I was sleeping, cutting the coolant line. I'd been sitting in a sitting duck, completely unaware. I looked around the area. No footprints near the puddle, but the ground was soft dirt, the kind that would show prints easily. No sign of anyone close by, but the silence felt off. The kind of silence that doesn't mean the danger is gone, just that it's waiting. I tried calling someone, but no signal. The trees and hills had me blocked. I checked the doors, locked, thankfully. The windows were tinted, but that wouldn't stop someone if they got in. I sat back in the van and thought through what had happened. Who'd want to mess with me? I'm not exactly carrying anything valuable. No drugs, no cash, no electronics worth breaking for. But still, someone had clearly come close enough to do damage. And they'd done it carefully, no rattling, no shouting, no headlights. I turned on the dashcam footage to see if it caught anything. The camera showed some blurry movement around the van just before I went to sleep, but nothing clear enough to identify anyone. Just shadows shifting in the trees. I was stuck there until morning. My plan was to wait it out, but every sound and all hoot, a snapping twig, a distant car, made me jump. At one point, I heard a soft rustle right outside. I froze, eyes wide in the dark. It was just the wind shaking the branches, but it was enough to remind me I wasn't alone. The sun finally started to come up, and I didn't wait for anything else. I packed up fast and took the van to the nearest town. I got the coolant fixed, told a mechanic what happened, but no one believed me when I said it was deliberate. After that, I was way more careful about where I slept on the road. I double-locked everything, parked where I could see a little more of my surroundings, and never ignored little sounds in the night again. I wasn't expecting to stay behind that strip mall overnight. I was just passing through a small town on a long drive and figured I'd find a quiet spot to stealth camp for a few hours. I pulled into the back of the strip mall late, around 11 p.m. The place was dead quiet except for the hum of a distant AC unit somewhere on the roof. I picked a corner spot, tucked away near some dumpsters. It felt kind of perfect, out of the way, no streetlights right on me, and a decent amount of cover from the bushes along the fence. I thought no one would bother me back there. I locked the doors and cracked open a window a bit for some fresh air before crawling into the back of my van to sleep. It was late, and honestly, I was beat. I kicked off my shoes as soon as I got settled. Felt good to finally relax. I remember thinking about how quiet everything was. The only sounds were my own breathing, a distant dog barking maybe half a mile away, and the faint, steady buzz of that AC unit. I was drifting off when I heard something really faint, almost like a shuffle or scraping. I opened my eyes and listened. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind messing with the trash or maybe a rat. I closed my eyes again and tried to ignore it. Minutes later, there it was again, a soft scrape, like something sliding against the pavement. I cracked my window a little more and leaned out to see if I could catch a glimpse of whatever it was. Nothing. No cars, no people, just the empty parking lot and those dumpsters. I went back inside and shut the window. I figured maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I tried to get back to sleep. That's when I noticed a feeling. Like someone was watching. Not in a way that something jumped out, but more like a low-key presence hovering just beyond the edge of my vision. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was alone and safe. I started to notice small things. The dumpster lids kept banging softly, even though there was no wind. At one point, I heard footsteps slow and deliberate on the cracked pavement near my van. But when I looked, no one was there. The shadows from the bushes seemed to twitch unnaturally, but it was just the wind again, right? I realized I'd been holding my breath without noticing, heart beating louder than it should have been. I kept telling myself I was overthinking everything. When morning started creeping in, I reached for my shoes to put them back on before I left. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper tucked under the edge of my driver's side door. I froze. I didn't want to open it at first. I just stared at it, heart thudding. Something about how carefully it was placed there, like whoever left it wanted me to find it, but without making a sound. Finally, I pulled the note out and unfolded it. Written in neat, small handwriting were the words. I saw you take your shoes off. Nice feet. No signature. No hint who left it. Just that sentence, all alone. The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just creepy, it was personal, like the person had been watching me the whole time. Not just a random passerby. Someone who had seen me, knew my habits, and was close enough to slip that note under my door without me hearing. I checked all my locks again, triple-checked the windows. I looked around the lot, half expecting to see someone lurking. But there was no one. Just the empty parking lot and the dumpsters. I started the van and pulled out fast. I didn't even stop to look back. For the rest of the drive, I kept replaying everything, the scraping sounds, the footsteps, the feeling like I was being watched. That note was the last straw. Whoever it was had been there all night, close enough to see me through the windows, probably sitting just behind the bushes. It never crossed my mind that something so simple, like taking my shoes off, could turn into one of the most unsettling nights I've ever had. After that, I never camped somewhere without checking twice for people lurking nearby. And I never took my shoes off inside the van again, at least not when I was alone. I usually try to avoid city lots for stealth camping. They're noisy, full of lights, and you never know who's around. But that night I was exhausted and didn't have much choice. I was driving through a part of town I wasn't familiar with, trying to make it to a better spot, but I got too tired and pulled into this big parking lot behind an old office building. No one was around, which felt good, so I decided to crash there for a few hours. I parked in a corner, as far away from the main road as I could get without getting too close to the dumpsters. I pulled down my curtains on all the windows. The van was old, but at least it had curtains I could close all the way. I don't like being seen when I sleep. The place felt empty, no cars pulling in, no distant voices, just a faint hum from streetlights overhead. I locked everything, set my phone on airplane mode, and laid back. Before I passed out, I took a few pictures to document where I was, just in case something happened and I needed to prove where I'd been. A dumb habit, maybe, but it felt smart. The night was quiet, but I kept waking up every now and then, thinking I heard faint footsteps on the cracked asphalt outside. Sometimes, I thought I caught a shadow moving just past the curtains, but every time I peeked, there was nothing. I figured it was just my eyes playing tricks in the dark. Around 3 a.m., I woke again. This time I heard something different, a soft scraping noise, like something being dragged slowly across the concrete. I froze, listening. It stopped after a few seconds. No footsteps, no talking, just silence. I told myself it was probably just a stray animal. I drifted back to sleep. When I woke up for real, the sun was barely starting to come up, painting the sky pale pink. The lot was empty except for my van. I yawned, stretched, and reached for my phone to check the time. That's when I noticed something was wrong. All my photos were gone. Every single one except one. I thought maybe I accidentally deleted them in my half-asleep state, but the one photo left was what made my stomach drop. It was taken from outside the van, looking in through the window. And it showed me asleep, lying there with the curtains drawn around me. I stared at the photo. The angle was just right, like someone was standing close to the side door, camera pointed right at me. There was no way I could have taken that picture. No one had knocked or made a sound that I could remember. I was sure I had locked every door and window. The van's curtains were supposed to block views inside. I checked the doors. They were all locked tight, no signs of forced entry. No footprints or tire marks anywhere near the van. The windows were still intact, and the curtains were still drawn, just like when I went to sleep. I scrolled through my phone, hoping for some clue, maybe a missed call or message. Nothing unusual. But the photo sat there on the screen, clear as day, showing someone had been close enough to watch me sleep. I couldn't tell when the picture was taken exactly. The timestamp was wiped out, just like the rest of the photos. I sat frozen for a minute, trying to figure out what to do next. Why would someone want that photo? Why delete all the others? Why not just break in or confront me? I started to pack up, but my hands shook so bad I dropped my keys twice. Before I left, I took one last look around the lot. No cars, no people, no sounds except birds starting to chirp with the morning. I didn't see anyone. I drove off as fast as I could, eyes glued to my rearview mirror until I was far away. After that, I never camped in a city lot again. I got a cheap dash cam with night vision and made sure I always checked my surroundings twice before settling in. That picture stayed on my phone for weeks before I finally deleted it. But every time I think about that night, I wonder how close someone got without me noticing, and what they might have been planning if I hadn't woken up when I did. I'd been stealth camping in my van for a while by then, mostly on dirt roads or empty fields far from busy spots. It was a way to save money and just get away, even if it meant being a bit uncomfortable. I always tried to pick places that were quiet and out of sight, nowhere too close to houses or anything that might attract attention. But, like anyone who does this a lot, I had some sketchy moments that kept me on edge. So, a couple weeks before what happened, I bought a little battery-powered security camera. Nothing fancy, just a cheap thing that could record overnight and run off a small battery pack. I figured it'd give me some peace of mind, especially since I was alone, and sometimes I'd get this creeping feeling like someone was watching. Not often, just random, but enough to bother me. I installed it outside my van, on a little bracket I made from a bent coat hanger and some tape, pointing at the passenger side door where I'd usually get in and out. It wasn't perfect, but it caught the main area I cared about: the door, the steps, the ground near the van. That first night, I was kind of proud. I went to bed feeling a little safer knowing the camera was recording. The first few nights went fine. The camera worked through the whole night, recording everything. Nothing unusual. A few times I checked the footage in the morning, just to see if there were any cars driving by or animals wandering close. Nothing that made me worry. Then, on the fourth night, I noticed the camera had shut off at some point after midnight. It was just dead, no footage from about 1:30 a.m. onward. I figured maybe the battery died faster than I thought, so I charged it fully the next day and taped a spare battery to the side, hoping that would help. Next night, same thing. It turned off right around the same time. I started to get annoyed but told myself it was probably a technical glitch. The camera was cheap, after all. But after the third time it happened, I got suspicious. I didn't like the idea of someone messing with the camera. I double-checked the mounting, taped it tighter, made sure the batteries were secure. Then I left the camera on, watching the live feed on my phone before going to sleep. That's when things got weird. Around 2 a.m., I saw the camera feed suddenly go dark. No signal. I switched to another app to see if the camera had just crashed, but the feed was gone completely. Then, through the little window in the side of my van, I caught movement outside. I saw a shadow near the camera's location. I didn't want to get out and confront whoever it was, not in the middle of the night. So I stayed still and watched the feed flicker back on a few seconds later, but it was shaky, like the camera had been moved. The next morning, I downloaded the full video from the camera's memory card and watched it carefully, frame by frame. About an hour before the camera cut out, you could see a figure walking toward the van. At first, just a vague shadow, but then you get a glimpse of a man's hand reaching under the van, carefully, like he's hiding or trying not to be seen. He stretched his fingers up toward the camera's power cable and unplugged it. That hand was rough, probably calloused, and the fingers were thick, like someone who worked with their hands a lot. The guy never came into the frame fully, just that hand disappearing, then the camera going dark. I rewound and watched again, thinking maybe I'd imagined it, but no. It was there. I spent the next few nights sleeping in the driver's seat with the door unlocked, ready to bolt. But I never heard anyone come near. Still, I kept seeing subtle signs that someone had been nearby, footprints in the dirt around the van, a twig snapped a few feet from where I'd parked, and once, a beer can left just outside my step. One night, I even heard quiet footsteps circling the van. Not close enough to touch it, but enough that I could tell someone was pacing around, maybe waiting or watching. I didn't say anything, didn't call the cops. I thought maybe they'd leave if I just stayed calm and didn't make a scene. On the sixth night, I found a new problem. I woke up to the sound of the van's side door handle rattling. It was slow and deliberate, like someone was testing it, trying to open it without making noise. My heart jumped, but I stayed frozen. The handle didn't turn, didn't open, but the rattling kept going for a few seconds before stopping. I waited until I thought whoever it was had left, then flicked on my flashlight and looked outside. Nothing but footprints in the dirt leading away from the van. No sign of a person. That was the last straw. The next morning, I drove out of there, parked at a busy gas station, and called a friend to come get me. I packed up fast and left the area. I even swapped out the cheap camera for a better one with motion detection and a built-in alarm. A few days later, when I checked the footage from the better camera, I saw something that chilled me all over again. A man, the same hand, this time a full figure crouching just out of sight by the back wheel of the van. He looked right at the camera, then reached out and tried to grab it, but it was mounted too high. He stood up and walked off without making a sound. I never found out who he was or what he wanted. But after that, I stopped stealth camping alone. I made sure someone knew where I was every night, and I never left the van unlocked. The worst part was how quiet it all was. No shouting, no breaking windows, just this slow, patient watching from the shadows. I'm still careful about where I park now, and I don't leave the camera off anymore. I was out of town on a road trip, just driving with no real plan, and by the time night came, I was somewhere in this tiny rural town. I pulled off behind a gas station to stealth camp for the night. It was the kind of place that didn't have many people around, mostly just locals stopping for gas or snacks before heading back to their farms or whatever. I picked a spot in the back, close enough to the building for some light but hidden behind a dumpster and a couple of big trucks. I figured it was a decent spot out of sight, but not sketchy. I was tired from driving all day and just wanted to crash early. I had the van set up like usual, curtains drawn, a blanket over the dashboard, and earplugs ready in case it got noisy. The first few hours were uneventful. I slept off and on, mostly on, but around 2 or 3 a.m., I woke up to some strange noises outside. It wasn't loud, just footsteps shifting on gravel and some quiet voices, like people whispering or talking low. At first, I thought it might be drunk kids messing around, but the voices were too deliberate, too calm. Like they were watching or waiting. I stayed still, trying not to make any noise. The footsteps circled the van slowly, stopping now and then. I could hear one voice say something, but it was muffled and too low for me to catch words. That went on for maybe 20 minutes. The footsteps kept pacing back and forth, then stopped for a moment near the passenger side. I held my breath. Suddenly, a quiet but sharp knock on my side door. Just one knock. I didn't move. No answer. The knock came again, just as soft. Then I heard a voice, calm but firm, almost whispering, "You don't belong here." I wanted to say something, tell whoever it was to go away, but my throat felt tight and dry. I stayed silent. The voice spoke again, this time slower, more deliberate. "We know when strangers sleep near our kids." The way it was said, there was no question, no room for argument. It felt like a warning, but also a threat. I couldn't tell how many people were outside, but the voice sounded like a man's. After that, I heard the footsteps retreating, slow and careful, fading away into the darkness. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I kept the van locked and sat with my phone in my hand, ready to call something if the knocking came back. But nothing else happened. By dawn, I decided not to stay any longer. I packed up quickly and left without looking back. I didn't want to know if they were still watching. The whole thing was small, just a knock and a few words, but it hit me harder than anything else ever has when I've been camping alone. Like I'd been warned off without even seeing who I was dealing with. After that night, I stopped parking in quiet places without people around. And I never slept behind a gas station again. I wasn't planning on camping that night. I was just passing through a part of the state I didn't know well, and it was too late to drive any farther. I figured I'd find a quiet spot to stealth camp in the van and get some rest before heading out at dawn. There was this small gravel lot next to a shuttered industrial building, not far from the highway but hidden enough by trees and some big dumpsters. I pulled in, parked as far back as I could, and set up. Curtains closed, a small fan running, phone on airplane mode. Pretty standard for me when I camp alone like this. I'd only been lying there for a little while when I started hearing it tapping on the roof. At first I thought it was rain, but it was clear sky that night. The tapping was light but steady, like someone drumming their fingers. I tried to ignore it, convinced it was just a branch or an animal, but it didn't stop. After a few minutes, the tapping slowed and stopped, then started again in a different pattern, like a rhythm. I even counted it, thinking maybe it was just me imagining things. But no, the tapping came in steady bursts, long pauses, then soft scratches. It went on for hours, like whoever was up there didn't want me to sleep. I got up and peeked out the curtains. Nothing but darkness and shadows between the trees. No cars, no people. I thought maybe it was some local kids messing around, but the lot was dead quiet. Not even a breeze. I got back in bed, trying to keep calm, but the noise started again, tapping and scratching, right above where the fan vent was. The fan was supposed to keep the van cool, but it also gave whoever was outside an easy target, a way to get inside if they wanted. I kept thinking about it, and I realized the tapping stopped every time I turned the fan off. Like the noise was connected to the fan running. I switched it off and the tapping stopped almost immediately. I turned it back on, and the tapping came back louder. That's when I started feeling watched, like eyes were on me from the dark. I didn't want to look outside again, but I couldn't stop myself. I tried shining my phone's flashlight around the edges of the windows, but all I saw was empty lot and trees. No sign of anyone. I debated calling the cops, but didn't want to get dragged into some mess over a noise. So I just stayed quiet, locked the doors, and stayed as still as I could. Morning came slow, and the tapping finally stopped around sunrise. I waited until it was light enough to look outside without feeling like I was staring into a dark pit. That's when I saw it. A metal ladder leaned against the side of the van, just below the fan vent. It was old and rusted, with paint chips missing and some dried mud on the bottom rung. There was no way I'd noticed it in the dark. It blended right in with the shadows and the dumpsters nearby. I checked the fan vent carefully. The screws were loose, like someone had tried to pry it open but didn't finish. The whole thing looked like it had been tampered with. I wanted to be mad or scared, but mostly I just felt frozen. Like whatever was going on, I'd been lucky they didn't try harder. I packed up fast, double-checking the van doors and windows, and drove away as soon as I could. I didn't stop until I was at a busy gas station with other people around. I kept thinking about that ladder. Why leave it there? Why not just break in? And who would spend all night tapping on a roof like that, trying to get in, but not actually push it? I never found out. I never heard anything else, but I stopped stealth camping after that night. I don't know what those guys wanted, but they made sure I knew I wasn't alone, and I wasn't welcome. I was parked on a side street in a tiny town just off the highway, near an old lumberyard closed for the night. The van's windows were all blacked out, and I tucked it behind a cluster of stacked pallets so no one would see me. I'd been on the road too long without a break and needed to crash somewhere quiet. This spot looked fine. I cooked some ramen on my little camp stove, washed my dishes in a bucket of water, then crawled into the back, pulled the curtain shut, and laid down. The street was empty except for an occasional distant car and the hum of an overhead transformer, enough noise to keep me from feeling too exposed. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, it was dark and late. I woke to a soft but firm tapping on the driver's side door. I sat up, heart hammering, and peeked through the sliver of curtain. A man stood there, maybe late 40s, dressed in a polo shirt and jeans. He held a stack of bills in one hand and a polite smile on his face. I unzipped the side door and cracked it. "Can I help you?" He tipped his head. "Sorry to wake you," he said quietly. "Funny thing, I saw you pull in earlier. I'm looking to buy a van, and I have cash right now. Interested? He laid the bills across his palm, several $100s. I can give you cash tonight. No questions. How about it? I blinked. Van life was cheap but cozy, and I wasn't planning on selling. I'm not looking to sell, I said. He nodded, like that made total sense. Sure. Just thought I'd offer. He smiled again, polite but, I don't know, too practiced. All right, good night then. He walked away without another word. I watched him through the thin crack until he turned the corner. He didn't hurry or slink off, just walked, arms relaxed, like he was in no rush. I locked the door again and tried to shake off the weird feeling. Someone showing up uninvited to buy your home on wheels wasn't normal. It didn't feel aggressive, just oddly intrusive. I chalked it up to small-town weirdness. I lay back down, but I kept thinking about those bills, the way he smiled. I drifted off at some point, though. A couple hours later, I woke again. It was quieter now, no cars, no hum from the transformer. The whole street felt dead. I heard soft footsteps on gravel, slow and deliberate. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps slowed as they passed the driver's side. Then a low scraping noise, like metal sliding against metal. I turned on my phone's flashlight and unzipped the door enough to peek out. The street was empty and dark, but my light caught a flash of metal a few feet away. A crowbar lay on the pavement, leaning against the front bumper of the van. I froze. A crowbar. And that sound had been someone leaning it against the metal, prying it just enough to scrape. I didn't dare step out. I watched for a long time, heart pounding. No one appeared. No shadows slipped along the walls. The crowbar stayed there, as if someone had left it for me to find. I hated being a coward, but I wasn't sticking my head out into that. I zipped the door shut and pulled the curtains again. I sat in the dark, imagining all the ways that Crowbar could be used and how easily he might open a window or pry a door if he wanted. I thought about the cash he offered, like bait. Maybe he'd come back if I showed interest. Maybe he'd circle the van until he found a way inside. I didn't know. I spent the rest of the night with my keys in one hand and my phone in the other, ready to call the cops if I heard anything else. The tapping never came back, but I kept hearing faint scraping noises, like someone running the crowbar's tip along the side of the van. I checked my phone occasionally, no service. It was one of those spots where you're completely cut off. It made me feel even more trapped. At first light, I pried the curtains open slowly. No one. The crowbar was still there, leaning against the bumper. I yanked open the door and grabbed it. It was smudged with dirt, edges nicked, like it had been used. I didn't hang around. I tossed the crowbar behind me and loaded up faster than I thought possible, stashing gear, yanking down curtains, hitting lock, start. The engine roared to life, and I pulled out, tires spinning on gravel. I didn't glance at the spot again. I headed back toward the highway as fast as I could. I called 911 once I had signal and told them what happened. They said they'd send a cruiser to check, but I never heard if anyone showed up. I never parked on city streets to stealth camp again. Even secluded dirt roads feel risky after that. Sometimes I still think about that polite guy and his stack of cash, and the crowbar next to my bumper, just waiting there. I spotted it as soon as I opened my eyes. A small black rectangle sitting on the windshield of my van, right in the middle. I blinked twice, convinced I was still dreaming. But there it was, a disposable phone, open with the screen lit up. The camera app was active. I sat up, heart thudding, and squinted at the thing. No case, no writing, just a plain plastic body you get when you buy one of those pay-as-you-go phones for emergencies. I grabbed it through the open window. It didn't have a SIM card, nothing in the sides but a micro USB port. It looked brand new, except for one thing. It smelled like sweat and cigarettes. I turned the screen around and saw it was in video mode. There was a thumbprint smudged icon in the corner showing a memory card almost full. I tapped it and the gallery popped up. Hundreds of short video clips, all silent, all taken last night. The first few were daytime shots, off-center snapshots of the road where I'd parked a few hours earlier. Then came the night. Clip after clip showed my van, always zoomed in tight at the side door window. There was a timestamp on each, 1:03 a.m., 1:15 a.m., 1:22 a.m., every few minutes through the night. The angle shifted slightly, like whoever held the phone was moving around, stepping back, leaning left, zooming in more. I could see the edge of my curtain in some, the reflection of my phone's screen in others, my own booted foot in one frame. There was no audio. Just that steady, creepy focus on my van. I slid out of the driver's seat and walked around, looking for footprints or someone holding the phone. The gravel was undisturbed. No one was there. The strip mall behind me, stores locked up, lights off, felt even more empty. I clicked through more clips. One showed crotch-high zoom on the passenger window. In another, I glimpsed the outline of a hand pulling aside the curtain just enough to peek in. I nearly threw up. Then I saw a frame where the camera wobbled, tilting down. Suddenly, a gloved hand reached into view, pressed the record button, then you could see that same sweaty, cigarette-smelling hand set the phone on my windshield. That was at 2:47 a.m. I stepped back, heart racing. I could feel eyes on me. I looked all around, but nothing. No movement in the shadows, no cars pulling in, no lights coming on. I climbed back in and locked the doors, hands shaking. I debated calling the police, no service. I considered driving away, but then I thought whoever did this might be waiting, watching for me to start the engine. My mind jumped back to earlier. I had heard scraping sounds in the dark, a slow, deliberate brush against the side of the van around 1 a.m. I chalked it up to a branch hitting the metal. If it was a person, maybe they were testing handles, but didn't try last night. Just took their shots with this phone. I texted a friend, but of course no signal. So I just sat there, watching the phone's gallery again, each zoomed clip twisting me tighter. I noticed patterns, clips at 1:03, 1:15, 1:22, 1:30. Same intervals. The last was 3:02 a.m. Whoever did this watched me for at least 2 hours without ever touching the door. I had to get out. I unplugged the phone, stuffed it in my pocket, and started the van. The engine roared too loud in the dark. I peeled out, tires throwing gravel, and didn't slow down until I was on the highway. I found a lit truck stop a few miles down, parked under bright LED lights, stared at the gallery again. One last clip showed the phone's battery almost dead, the screen flickering. The hand came back one more time, setting it upside down, camera still running right where I parked. Then nothing. I left without checking the rest of the nights on that card. I figured even if I got service later, going back wouldn't help. Whoever did this was careful. They watched, they recorded every glimpse of me, but they never came close enough to confront me. That phone? I dropped it in a trash can at dawn and kept driving. Every now and then I think about those clips, about how someone sat there in the dark, watching me sleep, zooming in on my van over and over. It wasn't a page in a movie. It was real. And I got out. I never thought I'd end up feeling that helpless in a van, but I did. I'd been driving through the back roads of Central Oregon, chasing fall colors and cheap motels, but I ran out of budget and decided to try stealth camping for the first time. I pulled off a narrow logging road just after twilight, when the sun was a dull orange behind the pines. The road was muddy from a rain 2 days before, and I saw a spot big enough for my van, tucked against a tree line, where I figured no one else would find me. I parked, shut off the lights, and flipped on my little battery lantern inside. The mud had soaked my sneakers, but I didn't care, just kicked them off and set them by the door. I cooked some instant stew, brushed my teeth with water from the jug, and crawled into the back for sleep, cracking the window a few inches for fresh air. About 2 in the morning, I woke up. I thought I heard something, maybe a twig snap or a soft footstep. The road was silent except for the wind through the pines and the distant rush of a creek. I rolled over and closed my eyes, but 5 minutes later, I heard it again, only this time it was closer. A slow, careful shuffle, like someone testing every step. I sat up with my heart thudding, the lantern's yellow light shaking. I held my breath and listened. The noises went right around the van, from the back door, past the side panel, toward the front wheel, and back again. I didn't dare crack a curtain, but I heard the scrape of mud under a foot. I grabbed my phone to call the one friend who might pick up this late, but no service. The sound circled again, slow and steady, and I realized it was an animal, too deliberate, too quiet. I switched off the lantern and grabbed my keys, pressing my ear to the door to see if I could hear it more clearly. The forest was alive in the dark, but the footsteps were the loudest thing for me, inching around the van. Every so often I heard a muted splat as a wet footprint landed on the mud by my tire. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, but those prints smelled raw, flesh on mud. I swallowed and hunched against the back wall, trying to be as small as possible. The footsteps slowed near the back door again, then paused. My door handle clicked softly, like someone testing it, expecting latch. It didn't turn. Maybe they gave up. The circle began again, going around, each footstep deliberate, but I didn't move. At some point, I must have dozed, because the next thing I knew it was dawn and birds were singing. The van felt warmer from the sunlight. I waited a few minutes, heart still pounding, then cracked the side curtain. The mud around my van was crisscrossed in every direction, barefoot footprints, dozens of loops around the tires, around the door, under the windows. It looked like someone had circled me all night. I tried to piece it together. No footprints leading away or back to the road. Just circles. Like they never left. Maybe the mud was deep enough that each step collapsed into the next. But no sign of a path, just those loops. I grabbed my phone, still no service, and tried recording video. The mud under the passenger door was crescent-shaped, inches thick, like someone had lingered there. My lantern lay on the ground, knocked over, with mud spattered on one side. I hadn't left it out. I always kept it inside on the bench. Now it sat in the dirt, light still flickering. I started to feel sick. Whoever had been walking around me, testing my door, watching me sleep, must have spent hours out there. I pictured them crouched low in the dark, waiting for me to wake or maybe hoping I wouldn't. That made me dizzy. I shoved my shoes back on and unlocked the doors. I didn't want to look inside, but I had to. The floor mats were soaked with mud, and the driver's side had half a dozen prints leading to and from the door. I snapped a quick photo in case I needed proof. I climbed in, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I reversed slowly, checking my mirrors. No movement in the trees, no figure in the shadows. Just the mud spattered behind me as I pulled onto the road and headed out. I drove until I found cell service and called my brother. I told him to meet me at the next town. I didn't stop to sleep again. I went straight to a motel with bright parking lot lights and plenty of cars. I kept glancing at the clock, at every sudden noise, reflexively checking the windows. Days later, I checked the backwoods forums. Someone mentioned a guy camping there who would slip into campsites and circle them all night, but I didn't dig too deep. Part of me didn't want to know how many other people he'd done this to. I never went back. I don't stealth camp anymore. Now I pay for quiet campgrounds with no neighbors and cell service. It costs more, but I don't like being watched. I'd been on the road for 6 weeks, living out of my van and bouncing from one trailhead to the next. That night I'd rolled into a sleepy downtown street late. No parking signs said nothing after 8, but I slipped in at midnight anyway, tucked between 2 storefronts and a row of empty cars. The street lights were old sodium bulbs, casting everything in that sickly orange glow. I figured if anyone saw me, they'd think I worked late or lived there. I brushed my teeth, locked the doors, and slid into the back to sleep. The engine cooling off and the soft hum of the transformer above were the only sounds. I set my phone to airplane mode, no signal, and drifted off. Sometime later, I woke up. Fuzzy at first, like I'd come up from a deep pool. I reached for my phone to check the time, 2:17 a.m., but the screen said low battery. That was weird. I plugged into the van's USB before I went to sleep. I kicked off my hoodie, swung my legs out, and sat on the edge of the bed. My foot hit something rubbery. I flicked the small dome light on. Something black was looped around my rear axle, just behind the wheel. I crouched and saw a bright yellow tow strap, cinched tight and hooked to the bumper of a big white SUV idling a few feet behind me. The engine noise was just loud enough to mask any footsteps. The strap looked new, didn't match any of my gear. I stood and peered between the curtains. The SUV's lights were off, but through my tinted window I could see the driver's seat empty and the engine still running. My headlights were off, but I remembered shutting them. Strange that they hadn't flicked on. If someone was still in that car, they'd have left everything ready to go. I swallowed and slipped out the side door. Gravel crunched under my boots. The air was still and cold. I kept my head down, flashlight in my hand, and edged around the van toward the strap. The yellow webbing was looped around the rear axle crossbar, cinched tight with a metal cam buckle. The other end disappeared under the SUV's low bumper. I knelt and tugged. The cam held firm. Someone had tightened it with force. No way I could just peel it off. I shined the light toward the SUV. No one inside. I walked around the front, no key in the ignition, just that engine humming like a beast waiting to lunge. The doors were locked. I could see the pins up inside. My heart was pounding. That thing could drag me down the street at any second if the driver returned. And they might have planned that. I went back to the van and jumped in the driver's seat. I locked everything, started the engine, and turned on the lights. The bow wave of light swept across the street. The strap was still there, and the SUV's engine cut out about 2 seconds later. I didn't wait. I slung the van into reverse, floorboarded, and fishtailed onto the road. I didn't look back. I drove half a block, then realized I needed to stop somewhere safe to figure out how to get that strap off or else I'd never make it. I spotted a 24-hour gas station down the road and pulled in. Under bright LED lights, I stepped out. The engine idled and I popped the hood. No, that wouldn't help. The strap was too tight. I tried to shimmy under with a crowbar I kept in the back, but the wheel well was too high and the strap was pinned solid. I climbed back in, heart racing. If I called a tow truck to remove my own strap, they'd get suspicious. I didn't have time or money. I needed an angle. I glanced at the SUV. Its lights were still off, engine silent. I walked around it, searching for a spare key or an open door. Nothing. I tried the trunk, locked. I even banged on the tailgate. No response. I walked back and forth, flashlight slicing through the beams from the station's facade. Behind me, the highway rolled by in a blur of headlights. A few trucks pulled in to fill up, and I tried to make eye contact, but nobody noticed me fumbling at the strap. I decided to chance it. I climbed into the SUV's passenger side, prayed the doors were unlocked, and tried the handle. Locked. I felt around the window frame, thinking maybe I could break in quietly with the crowbar. No way, the windows were tempered and too thick. I gloved my hand and tapped sharply on the windshield. No answer. Every second I spent away from my own van made me more certain the guy or guys who left that strap could be back at any moment. They probably left the engine to keep me trapped and show up when I tried to reverse. I climbed back into my van and shut the door. I considered stealing the SUV to free myself, but that was worse. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, head in hands. Then I saw it. A small cut in the strap's webbing, right where it looped around the axle. Probably a weak spot from manufacturing. I grabbed my pocket knife and wedged the tip into that fray. I twisted and saw threads start to unravel. It didn't take more than 15 seconds to saw through, the fibers popping and snapping under the knife's pressure. The strap fell away. I yanked it off the bumper and tossed it behind the gas pumps, then reversed out of the station as fast as I dared. No lights, no honk, just a quick roll back onto the street and emerge into traffic. I never figured out who set that trap. The lot was empty when I circled back an hour later, no palsy to hide a tow strap or a vehicle. No sign of the SUV. I spent the rest of the night in a hotel parking lot, nose to the neon. I still double-check my axle whenever I park somewhere new, but mostly I avoid streets after dark now. Some lessons aren't worth learning twice.